Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where we mentally and emotionally abuse our child and get away with no repercussions, because this week we watched It Takes You Away.
Written by Ed Hime.
And directed by Jamie Childs.
And aired on December 2nd, 2018. So we had a few different, ideas for the intro there. And I guess that's the one you went with.
Yeah, this is the first time in a while he basically just gave me carte blanche to pick whichever one I wanted.
Well, it's true, that does happen in the episode, surprisingly. At the end, they just kind of let them go off to live their life.
Well, they're going back to Oslo.
Where hopefully...
Guess they're tired of the cabin in the woods, that they only lived there for like 3 months.
Yeah, well, hopefully this scrutinizing eyes of, neighbors and maybe the government and neighbors in close proximity in a larger city will keep, this little girl from facing the mental scarring that she went through here again. Yeah.
Well, thankfully she didn't see all of the horrors of the Antizone that the rest of the TARDIS crew has to live with.
I mean, she can see splotches of light.
Only when they're really close, she said. So she didn't see the flesh moths chasing them.
Did have to live through her not mom and her actual dad just like totally...
gaslighting
her? Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much. I say we just get right into it, because there's some stuff to talk about this week.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about. So the Doctor and co arrive in Norway.
Right. I think this is the first time we've been to Norway on the show.
Yeah, unless, where was Bad Wolf Bay? Was that in Norway?
I think they filmed it in Norway. I don't know if, in universe, it was in Norway.
Huh.
I think we made a joke about this on the episode, that Rose just traveled, all the way to this random beach.
Yeah. So they arrive. They're sort of in the middle of nowhere in Norway. They're at just a fjord out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, Graham's like, that's a nice fjord. And the Doctor's like, it is definitely a fjord. That is how you could describe that.
The Doctor eats some wild grass. That's how she knows they're in Norway.
Doctor acting a little weird here.
Is this Ed Hime's first episode?
Yeah, I believe so.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, and I know he comes back next season.
Yeah, I don't know if the episode he writes next season has aired yet.
He didn't write the Jadoon episode, did he?
Well, I guess I could find out. Oops. No, he wrote Orphan 55.
Okay, gotcha. That one that was apparently kind of like Paradise Towers?
One that we'll see in approximately 7 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I know his return, I remember, was a little bit, when it was first announced, a couple weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, a little more, was kind of a divisive thing, because this was kind of a divisive episode.
And I think the episode that he wrote for Series 12 was also a divisive episode.
Yeah. I don't see, having watched this now, I don't see why it was divisive, but we'll get to the divisive sections later.
Well, so the Doctor points out that there's a cottage in the winter in Norway, and there's no smoke coming out of the chimney because it's apparently freaking cold. But it's not like Ryan, Yaz, or Graham seem to be chilly in any way. They seem to be just fine.
Yeah, so they make their way to this cottage, and it looks sort of, I don't know, like the aftermath of a horror movie, like whatever creature devastates in a horror movie out in the woods has already devastated here and gone on its way to presumably terrorize other areas.
Right.
So they're wandering through the house. It's very creepy. This is a very good scene. This is where, I have a couple instances in my notes where I was like, I already love this. Like, this is already the best this season. And this was the first instance of that. Yeah.
That's
and
fair.
I was right. It held up. Somehow held up.
I liked your note that you mentioned on Twitter where you were like, even if this just starts sucking right now for the rest of this episode, this was the best season of Doctor Who so far.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I said best episode, but that is true. I think this is quite possibly the best season of New Who.
I feel like we have the opposite of the rest of the fandom, where the newest thing that's put to camera is the greatest thing, whereas the rest of fandom thinks the newest thing is the worst.
I guess, but I don't feel like my opinion falls into that. I don't think that this is the best because it's the newest. I just think it's the best because it's the best. It has the best episodes in it. It has companions who actually feel like characters for once.
I mean, yes, that is true. Although the one thing that I disliked about this episode was how Yaz just kind of, this week, her entire purpose is to like stand with the Doctor and go, what?
Yeah, kind of. Well, based on that theory
that you're not going to mention because it's like entirely hinged on spoilers that we found out.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple actually really interesting theories going around about certain events that happen next season, some of which seem very convincing to me.
Some of which, well, I mean, we'll have to watch the episodes to know how convincing they are. I mean, it could just be cherry-picking information.
I guess.
At least we'll finally be able to join the theorization in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks! We'll be caught up!
Not totally.
Well, not totally caught up, but almost. We'll be contemporaneous.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to me. We started as just a small little hobby, and now look at our media empire.
6 years later, and still nobody cares.
That should be the tagline on the podcast. 6 years later, and still nobody cares.
Yeah, should be. So they find a little girl in a closet.
Yeah, her name is Hana.
Right, and she looks very scared. She's clutching like a baseball bat or something. And they're like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, Graham is like, are you hungry? And I appreciated them bringing back this subplot that's kind of been running in the background of this whole season where Graham's like, hey, can we go get some food? And then that one time he's like, have you ever noticed we never stop for food? And then this time he's like, I brought this sandwich along just in case we didn't stop for food.
Companions with actual character.
And character arcs that aren't like massively world-changing.
Yeah, I mean, not to digress too much, this isn't something I planned on talking about, but yeah, now that you bring it up, like, that is a nice thing that, like, the companions, like, character development, their arcs, their personalities don't hinge on, like, being these supernatural beings, like the Impossible Girl, the girl who waited, and, like, your weird, like...
Dr. Donna.
Exactly, and River, just all the things that were going on with River. I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but it's actually nice in a way that these are more down-to-earth.
It's nice to feel homely. It's nice that, like, Graham is not, like, I don't know, the god of all.
A being like the oil or, I mean, in a way, Hannah herself, not Hannah, Hannah, the oil, was kind of...
It's confusing.
Was kind of involved in all of that.
Oh, wasn't it Heather? Wasn't her name Heather?
It was Heather, yeah. Anyway, we find out from Hana that her dad, she moved out here with her dad.
After her mom died.
Right. But her dad just, like, left, and there are monsters, surrounding the house.
It kind of reminds me of A Quiet Place for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's a cottage in the middle of nowhere and there's monsters outside of it.
A little bit. I can't believe that they're making A Quiet Place 2. A quieter place.
A quieter place.
I guess that movie was a hit because there's actually a Netflix, like, total ripoff of that movie. I forget what it's called, but yeah, I'll put what it is in the show notes. But it's like a total knockoff of that movie with, like, its own pterodactyl-esque beings terrorizing, a small middle of nowhere farm.
So Ryan, in his all-knowing wisdom, just busts out the, well, how do you know he didn't leave you? And literally everyone just turns and goes, really, Ryan? Really?
And you know what? In hindsight, maybe they should have listened.
Yeah, in hindsight, he was right.
Ryan just proving himself to be the best of this bunch yet again.
Graham's my favorite. Graham's my favorite. But they're all good. I mean, of the companions, I mean, anyway.
So apparently this thing is coming out to hunt. It comes out, at a specific time each day. And Hana's like, yeah, it's coming. So we better hide.
Yeah. Hana's blind, we should mention.
Right. You can see small splotches of light.
If they're really close.
Right.
Apparently.
Which I think is pretty common. I think it's actually more rare to be like fully 100% blind than it is to be able
like
to see
legally
a little
blind.
Bit. Yeah. And apparently, well, one of the companions, I forget who, questions like what it could possibly be that's terrorizing the house. And I think the doctor says something along the lines of there are worse things out there than people, which just confirms that it's the Pating out there. No, I'm just kidding.
Wouldn't that be wild?
What it actually turns out being is like, in a way, more mind-blowing than that. But we'll get there.
Well, so Ryan and Yaz go to this barn. The doctor tells them to go to this barn while her and Graham go to talk with Hana. And I was going to say Ryan and Yaz just find chickens just like strung up in the barn.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's full of weird stuff, like the chickens, and then like they find not weapons, but just like, if I remember correctly, just tools that like could be used as weapons or something like that. I don't know. I watched this like over a week ago. So just weird stuff going on.
Right.
We find out a little bit more about Yaz actually in this sequence. And that's what I kind of like. Like, yeah, Yaz was sort of just part of the background this week, but there was just a little bit with her. We find out that she had training with kids, I think it was, as part of her police, training.
Academy, yeah.
Something like that. And Ryan obviously has never gone through anything like that. Because this is when Yaz sort of brings up to Ryan, like, hey, not cool that you said that thing about her dad leaving.
And Ryan's just like, yeah, well.
You'll see them right. I'm just kidding.
Personal experience, Yaz. I mean, it is true. I mean, Ryan's dad did leave after Ryan's mom died. So...
yeah, it is a very similar situation here, actually. We find out. So, Graham, meanwhile, is just checking out the main house, and he comes across this mirror that doesn't display his reflection.
And Ryan kind of runs in and spooks him from behind. He's like, whoa. Whoa.
So this is how they find out that they're vampires.
Vampires of Norway.
No. But the doctor comes by, and she's like, hey, this is like really weird. Step away from the creepy mirror, guys. Let me check this out. So she goes into the mirror.
She sticks her head through.
And it's a portal to another dimension.
Right. So she decides to close the portal, but it immediately opens itself again, and she's like, damn, I guess the only way to find out what this is to go in.
So they do, and they wind up like on the set of like an 80s fantasy movie for kids, like Neverending Story or Legend or like one of those.
Well, before they do that, she writes something on the wall. She tells Ryan and Hana that it's a map of the weakest points of the house, but she actually writes a message to Ryan that says, assume her father is dead, take care of her, find out who else can take care of her.
Right.
So, and she leaves Ryan to look after Hana, which, given like the way he's treated Hana like in the past 10 minutes may not be the best idea, but...
Well, even when she says like, Yaz, Graham, you guys come with me. Ryan, look after Hana. You hear like, Hana's like, ah.
Damn.
And she immediately realizes that it's not a map because she's like, "So what are those weak points, Ryan?" He's like, the
conservatory."
Yeah, and that's what he came up with, not like the kitchen. Like, come on, man. Like...
Yeah, the doctor should have written down a fake room for Ryan to say in the event that Hana asks.
Well, so the doctor and Graham and Yaz go into like this fantasy zone.
Damn, I just thought of a really, really bad pun. Should I say it?
Sure, why not?
Graham is Ryan's grandfather. Oof. That was rough.
It was all right. But yeah, this is where I started really loving the episode. I loved it before this, but, once they went into the Antizone, it was just the best thing ever for me.
Yeah, when it was named the Antizone, I really thought for a second Omega was going to pop out and be like, "Hello, what's up? You haven't seen me for 30 years?"
No, instead we get someone named Ribbons, I think it was.
That's true. Ribbons, that's what I've got.
Yeah.
And so he basically... smells like flesh and pee, and he offers them the only lantern in the entire Antizone, as well as information leading to Eric in exchange for the Sonic. But the doctor counters with, "Well, you can have the Sonic upon delivery of the promised items."
Right. His lamp sort of looks like a little, balloon that he carries around with him.
Yeah. Like a red balloon.
Yeah. And he's just acting like something out of an 80s kids movie, and, I just loved this. Just the sort of weird, creepy fantasy creatures who, you need to make a deal with them and, they want your soul type thing. But yeah, they're walking through the Antizone. I think this is when the doctor reveals that it's an Antizone, which she says is like a zone set up when two worlds are like incompatible or something.
Yeah,
like
Ribbons mentions an Antizone, and then the doctor explains it to Graham and Yaz. And leaves out the part where Omega wants to flood Amsterdam.
He's made his way to Norway.
He's going to flood Norway now.
He's expanded his plans. Meanwhile, in the real world, Hana, knocks out Ryan.
Well, Ryan goes outside to investigate the monster, and he finds in what is kind of an underwhelming reveal, but not really. He finds just a speaker playing the monster noises just in the backyard, and he's like, "Oh, come on."
Yeah. So he goes to reveal that information to Hana, and she just slams a door into his head.
Yeah, but giving him a concussion.
Killing him. Well, that's when I thought, my theory at this point in the episode was that the doctor...
real monster was Hana.
Well, yeah, kind of, because the doctor had mentioned that the Antizone was a space set up between two, incompatible worlds, so I thought they had somehow gone into another dimension, and that the world with Hana in the house and the recording and all of that was, some weird alternate dimension that was out to kill them or something. But it turns out that's where they're going now, so...
Yeah, the flesh moths show up, and Ribbons chucks a rat, and the flesh moth goes after the rat, but then a little bit further on, Ribbons is like, "Yeah, I've led you astray. Haha, now you have to give me the Sonic because I cut your little string leading you back." And another flesh moth shows up, and the doctor's like, "Well, what about this flesh moth?" Ribbons is like, "Well, I got one more rat. Let's lure it away." And the flesh moth doesn't go for it. And Ribbons is like, "Run!"
Well, at some point, I forget how it's done, but his lantern goes out or it gets destroyed or something.
Yeah, it goes out when Hana comes through the portal, because every time someone goes through the portal, this really loud, annoying noise plays. Because she goes to the portal when Ryan's knocked out. Ryan's knocked out for a surprisingly short amount of time, because he's kind of back up on his feet in the next scene. He's like, "Let's go!"
Yeah. Well, Ribbons gets eaten alive.
Yeah, because the doctor's like, well, Ribbons wanted us to run, so what we should actually do is just stand perfectly still. And it works. The flesh moths go for Ribbons, and while that's happening, the doctor and co make off like bandits.
They make their way back through the portal, but they quickly realize that it wasn't actually the same portal, and they're in an alternate world that looks very similar to the one they just came from.
Yeah, the cinematography here was really good, in my opinion, because everything in the mirror world is like shot from the opposite side that it was in the real world.
Yeah.
Like in the real world, if you're looking at the mirror, everything was shot from the right side, whereas like in the mirror world, everything is shot from the left side.
Whoa, deep.
I don't know. Just showing that they're like actually mirrors of each other. The kitchen is like in the opposite orientation as the other one. Like there's a lot of attention to detail here, surprisingly.
Yeah. They go into the kitchen, they find Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you doing here? Who are you? How'd you get here? And they're like, we came through the same portal that we know you came through. And he's like, well, I can't go back because of this. Well, the doctor's like, who else is here, Eric? Why don't you tell us? He's like, I didn't say anything. He's like, 2 plates, Eric. He's like, ah, damn.
Yeah, and let's not forget to touch on how Eric is portrayed as like a stereotypical like Norwegian. Like, first of all, he turns around and he's wearing like a metal shirt.
Well, I mean, Hana's wearing an Arctic Monkeys shirt. So.
And then let's also not gloss over what they're eating, which is like probably hard as, cardboard consistency, like hard tack level, like cracker with just stuff on top of it. Typical, northern meal.
Norwegian specialty.
Yeah. If it just seems like I'm digging a little too hard into this, I just have a very not soft spot in my heart for Swedish food, which I'm not forced to eat, but which I eat occasionally for reasons.
Hey, at least you've never had to have that rotted shark.
Carl, rotten buried shark, unearthed after who knows how long.
And I think this is the first and probably only time I'll have an opportunity to mention the video where Gordon Ramsay and James May are eating food together, eating the weirdest food possible. And they bring out some Hakal, and Ramsay's like, the test of whether you're a true man or not is whether you throw up when you eat this. and James May just kind of casually eats it with no visible reaction at all. And Ramsay like instantly vomits. And James just goes, I'm disappointed in you, Ramsay.
Yeah. So we get Hana's mom, whose name is like not pronounceable by me.
I don't even remember what it was. Trina.
Yeah. But it wasn't Trina. It was like some other
say it with like a Slavic accent, like
yeah.
Trina or something. But just gonna call her Trina.
Yeah. Sure. I'll go with that too. She walks in. She's like, hey.
And the doctor's like, this is weird. This is weird. Trina's like, I remember dying. And the doctor's like, even weirder.
And this is like, I don't know, I just love the mystery behind this. They don't keep up the mystery for very long, but I was like, what is this? Is this heaven? Like, is this some post-death
Missy's
world?
TARDIS.
Like, yeah. What is this? What's going on here? So, and then Eric reveals his master plan to keep Hana inside with recordings of monster noises and telling her that monsters are coming to destroy the house.
Yeah, apparently he's been like crossing between the two worlds every so often, and then he started to wonder, what if I go visit Trina and then I leave and I can never go back? So I decided to leave Hana and go back to my dead wife. And then Graham's like, mate, you got to get your priorities in order.
Someone said should have just got Wi-Fi. I forget who said that, but...
Oh, that was Ryan, I think. He's like, keeping you inside with like recordings of monsters. Should have just gotten Wi-Fi.
So something even weirder happens. They go out to the little garden or the outside area. This house looks it looks like it's in much better shape than the other house in the other world.
Because it's not barricaded.
Yeah. So they go out to the little garden, and who else is there but Grace?
You say that like it was obvious that Grace was going to be there. I remember the first time I watched this, it was absolutely not obvious that it was going to be Grace.
No, yeah, I was like, holy cow, like, what is going on here?
And that's why production order-wise, this was filmed second of the whole season.
Interesting. Yeah, and actually, 50DW50 on Twitter mentioned some production information, how there was a lot more in the Antizone that actually ended up getting cut. And I was going to look up some of that stuff, but I forgot. I didn't.
So what you'll do is put it in the show notes.
Exactly. So we see there's sort of the first indication of the frog in this episode. We see Graham clutch his little golden frog necklace, I think.
Well, he asks Grace to tell him all about the necklace if she's really Grace. Grace is like, you gave me that necklace on my birthday the same year that Ryan got me another frog necklace because I like frogs.
Right. And as someone who's been looking forward to the frog for over a year, and keep in mind, I didn't know what the frog was. I just knew that there was a frog in this episode. I was like, is this it? Is this the frog?
Is this the frog that everybody raved about / ranted about? No, not yet. It gets better.
So Grace reveals that, she does have her memories and that it is really her, as far as we know at this point.
Right.
And Graham is like, so it's really you.
I've missed you
really
a lot.
you.
And she's like, it seems like you've been getting on fine without me. And he's like, I'm really lost. I don't know what to do. And she's like, you'll figure it out. And so Ryan and Hana are making their way through the Antizone. We cut back to them and they're like running away from the flesh moths.
Yeah.
I assume something got cut here explaining how the flesh moths, like the escalation to the flesh moths, but...
Yeah, well, apparently there were going to be a few more creatures in the Antizone, but they ended up with just the flesh moths and ribbons.
Hana makes her way through the portal. Ryan stays back to distract the flesh moths a bit before... the portal's being held open by the doctor who, on Yaz's suggestion, reverses the polarity. But before she does that, we should explain that the doctor figures out what's going on here.
Right.
Because her fifth grandma, she's apparently had 7 of them. I wonder if she actually had 7 step-grandparents, or if her grandparents just regenerated and 7 of the incarnations of her grandparents cumulatively were women. Anyway, Granny 5 used to tell a bedtime story about the Solitract, a sentient universe that is sentient.
She gives this little backstory about how, before the Big Bang, the universe just, couldn't form itself because of the Solitract, and the Solitract separated itself from the known universe, and then everything started working properly. This is actually sort of a callback, maybe not an intentional one, but in my opinion, to a Moffat era type idea that's just very abstract and
huge.
Yeah. But yeah, this universe is the Solitract universe, the universe that the Solitract being formed.
Is.
Yeah. This actually there's a Renaissance philosopher, I want to say it was Spinoza, but I'm not 100% sure, whose whole philosophy was that this was also used to defend his what we would now call atheism, but his entire philosophy was that the universe itself was just God, the being God being God is expressed in the universe, the universe's existence is just what God is.
Interesting.
And like a lot of Renaissance philosophers, almost part of that was in response to hey, are you an atheist? And he's like, no, I just think that the entire universe is God. But there's more to it than that, obviously. I don't know too much about it, but yeah.
Do you believe in God? Yes.
So that's what this universe is, but apparently now that there are beings from the regular universe here, everything is just going to pot. And the thing is, the Solitract was actually trying to bring things from the other universe to its universe because it was lonely.
Right. I made an interesting note here that probably means nothing, but I think could be Ed Hime potentially hit and running Doctor Who and no one noticed.
And he rewrote the origins of the Doctor Who universe, so...
But I mean, when the Doctor's explaining to Yaz how the two worlds are separated, she refers to the, quote, regular world, unquote, as your world and not as our world, as you would assume if she was including herself in it. What does that mean? Could mean anything. Could mean anything. Could mean the Doctor's not of this world either.
Well, thing is, with some of the theories that are making their rounds around the internet, especially with the Prisoner of the Jejune episode having aired.
Fugitive of the Jejune.
Fugitive of the Jejune, yeah.
God,
sorry.
That's really hard to say quickly. Fugitive of the Jejune.
On the moon. With some of those theories going around, that's a very interesting little line here.
Yeah, I kind of picked it out before learning of that theory that you told me about an hour ago, so...
Yeah, we'll have to see what goes on, what happens, how this all plays out.
How all the pieces fit together.
And sort of another little thing I like here is that what prompts the Doctor to actually realize all of this is something Yaz says. So yeah, she might be kind of not doing anything action-wise in this episode, but I think her words and her ideas definitely influence what goes on.
Mm-hmm.
But they realize that they can't stay there, or else they'll all just die and destroy the entire universe, or something bad will happen.
Yeah, the Doctor says that one person was manageable, but the 5 of them being there, because Hana's jumped through at this point, is collapsing the solid track universe and could potentially destroy our universe as well.
Right. So at that point, Trina and Graham and Grace and Eric all come back into the room with the mirror, and they're like, Trina and Grace are like, so you're not staying here then?
Yeah, well, when Hana mentions that Ryan is back in the Antizone, Graham's like, wait, Ryan's back? We gotta go back to get him. And Grace is like, no! And Graham's like, no? What do you mean, no?
You were so close. So close.
Well, he says that a little later because now Yaz basically gets booted out of the solid track universe because she's basically tearing it down. She's like, this is all fake. Yeah. This isn't real. You can't do this to your daughter, Eric. And so she gets booted out. Yeah,
why didn't Yaz and the Doctor get any of their long lost loved ones in the solid track? You're like, what does the solid track have against them, huh?
Who would it put there for the Doctor? Susan?
Yeah, possibly.
Actually, that would have been a mind-blowing twist.
Yeah.
That would have been mind-blowing. Just Carol Ann Ford just shows up and is like, hello, grandmother.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's like, oh, shoot.
Would have been amazing, yeah. I know they wanted to focus more on, Grace and stuff with her sort of... And that's the thing, what other season of Doctor Who would have brought back Grace and not just used her as, the impetus?
And not just brought her back permanently?
Well, okay, yeah, that too. But, yeah, I mean, I thought her role in all of this was just the impetus for Graham and Ryan, but no, in a way, this isn't really Grace, but this is all related to Graham and Ryan's reconciliation at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
So the Solid Track starts kicking them out of its universe one by one when they start rejecting it, because Hana was like, I know you're not my mom. And that's what I thought, maybe the Solid Track's way that it deceives people has something to do with sight.
Yeah, well, I kind of think that's the implication, because Hana can, the Doctor says, sense that it's not her mom.
Yeah.
But no one else can. The Doctor says, why can Hana sense it, but not you, to Graham.
Right. So then she gets kicked out.
Yeah, and then Graham gets kicked out next because Graham asks fake Grace, what about Ryan? Also, the Doctor says a really interesting line that I think helps spur this on, where she tells Graham, I know you still blame yourself for Graham's death, but it's not your fault. And you got to let that feeling go, it's not your fault, Graham.
Right.
And Graham's like, you're right. And then Grace is like, nah, Ryan will figure himself out. And Graham's like, the real Grace would never have let me just leave Ryan behind.
Right. So that's when he gets kicked out. And Eric is like, yeah, I'm going to stay here.
So then the doctor basically pulls out some emotional manipulation of her own where she's like, so Solid Track, do you want to keep Eric? Is he really your best option? You know, I've lived like 9 to 10 times as long as he could ever possibly live. Like, you know, I've seen a lot more. I've been everywhere. I've got a time machine. Is he really your best option? And Eric's like, wait, what? What?
So he gets kicked out. And then it's just the doctor and the Solid Track, and like everything starts deteriorating.
And then the universe like freezes and I guess reboots itself, and it's just a white corridor, and there's a chair at the end of the corridor, and the doctor walks down the hallway, and she's like, wow, the Solid Track is a frog. As if the day couldn't have any more surprises. It's a frog, the greatest thing Doctor Who has ever done.
It is one of the greatest, at least in this new era, at least in this 2005 and beyond era. I'll say this is one of the best scenes. And the Solid Track isn't actually a frog, it's just taking that form because it says the form delights it.
As it delighted Grace. And it speaks like Grace. It's using Grace's voice.
It delights you away. So the frog is like, so here we are in my world. But the doctor can't stay.
Yeah, the Solid Track is like, I want to hear everything. Be my friend. And the doctor's like, okay, I'll be your friend. The universe is great and vast, and I haven't seen like a tiny percentage of it, even though I've seen so much. And you are like so great and amazing and beautiful, but you gotta let me go because otherwise we're both gonna die. The Solid Track is like, no, you're supposed to be my friend. And it's like, friends help each other get through the pain, not ignore it.
Right. The doctor promises that she'll always be its friend, even though they'll never be able to like come in contact with each other ever again.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, gotcha. Brought a tear to my eye. No, not really. So the doctor is sent back.
We should mention they're not actually getting sent back. They're all getting sent into the Antizone, and then they gotta run through the Antizone to get back.
Thanks for that. I guess it doesn't have the power to send them all back to their own universe.
Yeah, I mean, because the Antizone.
I would assume not. Otherwise, maybe it's just like, fine, don't want to be part of my world, then die in the Antizone.
Yeah, so they run through the Antizone, and they make it back, and then Eric is like, we're gonna go back to Oslo.
Yeah. This was so weird. He gets off scot-free for like the total emotional and mental abuse of his young daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, and for abandoning her.
Yeah.
For his dead wife. And being willing to still abandon her.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yep.
Maybe this is what people point to when they say that the morality of Series 11 is wonky.
Maybe, yeah. That happens, though. And in a way, we don't see this, but I feel like they just get in that little motorboat and ride off. The doctor and everyone else goes back into the woods where the TARDIS is. We get one last little bit with Ryan and Graham, where Graham tells Ryan about how he saw Grace.
Yeah.
And Ryan, for the first time, calls Graham Granddad.
And Graham's like, what? And Ryan's like, your hearing's not getting that bad, old man. They go into the TARDIS and leave.
Yeah. So, nice little scene there. Glad that, you know, the sort of tension that's been between them for the entire thing is actually being brought up. Mm-hmm. Things are actually being done with it. You know, so as opposed to...
It's just being dropped.
Yeah.
Like classic Who.
Yeah. Well, all series 1 through 10, even in a way. Maybe not to the extent that classic Who like to drop subplots, but...
I mean,
you know.
Think about Turlo, who joined the TARDIS under false pretenses because he was being manipulated by the Black Guardian. Bet you didn't remember that part of his character.
I did.
And then, like, 3 weeks later, they just kind of, the doctor's like, yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
That one was at least addressed. I mean, what about things like, I know we harp on this every single week, but like Mel being a programmer and Perry being a botanist, like, what did that have to do with really anything?
Well, even think about Nyssa, whose dad gets, like, brutally murdered by the Master, and then, like,
Yeah, a week later, she's just like...
She's just fine. Tegan, whose aunt gets brutally murdered by the master. The master just really messing up companions' lives in the classic era, I'm starting to realize.
Yeah.
And then just a week later is like, yep.
I know we mentioned this, maybe like last week or a couple weeks ago, but my new theory and what I like to think now is that Turlo gets brought back to his planet and they're like, we're just kidding about your charges being dropped, and like gets sentenced to life or something.
Turlo deserves better than that. Turlo was one of the best companions in Classic Who.
He was the best, in my opinion.
Anyway, let's talk about this episode.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I love this. Especially loved the Antizone, and how it was something out of like an 80s kids movie, how it was just so dark. And I don't know how, like, to what extent the creatures were CG and what extent they were practical effects, but they looked like practical effects. And that just brought me back to watching 80s classics like Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal or whatever it's called, and Neverending Story. No, I actually don't like, Labyrinth or really Neverending Story, but I don't know, I like the vibe. So, well, Labyrinth in particular is one that I like have never enjoyed, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I like the contrast between the Antizone being this dark area with no light at all, and then the like bright white Solitrax plane at the end of the episode.
Even the Solitrax like mirrored universe is very saturated, and there's a lot of light, more so than the real world.
Right. I like the whole meeting between the Doctor and the Solitrax, where she's like, friends don't let friends just ignore pain. They help them through it. Kind of like, with I think it's kind of echoing like Ryan and Graham kind of coming to terms with the fact that like they can't just ignore the fact that Grace is gone.
Right.
And that they've got to confide in each other and use that relationship that they have to get through it together.
Right. Even though, Ryan, up until this point, never saw Graham as his granddad, only knew Graham for maximum 3 years, because Graham mentions that he met Grace like 3 years ago. So yeah, I mean, we don't get it explicitly in the episode, but we kind of understand that, like, hey, this is a guy who just kind of showed up in Ryan's life. Ryan didn't necessarily want him to be in his life, but they're in this together now.
Right.
The Doctor also, when she's describing the universe, she has this line. She says, "You think words can do it justice?" I like this line. This is actually a lot of medieval. It's a medieval, like, quote unquote topos, which topos is now just basically the equivalent of what we now call trope, which is why people don't like the word trope, because they say, like, it's actually a topo or whatever. But it's the indescribability. I get trope. I'll just call it a trope. Which is like when it's evoked a lot, weirdly, in like medieval texts, medieval writing, of like when something's so great and there's so much respect around it, you just say, like, you mention how it's indescribable, or how like words could never do it justice or something, which isn't too like wild of an idea.
Yeah,
makes sense, but Doctor kind of evokes that here.
Yeah, I think I agree.
This is the first episode that I really enjoyed Akinola's score in.
Yeah, I actually like noticed the music in this episode when they're in Norway, like at the beginning of the episode. I think like at the end of the episode when they're running out of the Antizone, it kind of goes back to, I think, what you called Kickstarter music. But at the beginning of the episode, the first half of the episode almost, it's this very like somber, almost single violin kind of score.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I know I mentioned how, I wish Murray Gold stayed on, but, now I'm seeing that, maybe Gold had his strengths and Akinola has his, because I don't think we would have gotten such a creepy, like, horror vibe with if this had been Gold,
Yeah, but I don't know if I'd describe the music as creepy. I think I'd describe it as contemplative or somber.
Sure.
I think maybe Gold's strength was always the big bombastic stuff, and maybe in the like quieter moments of reflection, he maybe I wouldn't say struggled, but it wasn't his forte, which is I think why some scenes or like when we get the Zygon speech in Zygon Invasion Inversion, there's just no music, which in many ways makes it more powerful, but.
Yeah, that's actually... Yeah, go on.
I was going to say that maybe Akinola's strength is so kind of the reverse, that maybe his strengths aren't the big, like, bombastic things, and are maybe the more, like, intimate, single-person contemplative moments, which I think is potentially why Chibnall chose him, because it seems like he's going for a more, like, down-to-earth, intimate kind of feel to Doctor Who, at least in this season.
Yeah, I mean, things are definitely more character-driven as opposed to, like, the older seasons that are more like really weird, huge, massive ideas that sometimes don't land on their feet driven. But yeah, that's actually something, it's weird that you bring that up because it's actually something that I was thinking about when I watched this of like, does Akinola decide when to use music and when not to, or is he, I would assume so, and I assume Gold did as well. Mm-hmm. Or are they just responsible for like, hey, we want music in this scene, make music for us?
I mean, it depends how different TVs are from movies. I know in movies, it's like, I think depends on the director, how much freedom you give your composer. Like, I know we always talk about Sergio Leone basically having Morricone compose the score before the movie's even shot, and then shooting the movie around the score. I know there's been some, not necessarily controversy, but some upset regarding Rise of Skywalker because the music in the movie is like not represented by the music release that they released, and the music in the movie is like in many ways sometimes very poorly cut or choppy because multiple pieces that Williams scored cut together in a way that maybe he didn't intend originally. And also like a lot of music from the movie not appearing on the score release for some reason. But I would assume that, like, for this television show, that he has some say over where the music is used, although maybe not as much as we might assume, since, like, you mentioned that a lot of stuff in the Antizone was cut out. Like, maybe there's music that was composed for all of that that either got cut completely or was used somewhere else in the episode that it wasn't originally composed for.
Yeah. I mean, my assumption with that is that there would be some conversation around it, right? If maybe they're like, hey, we want music in this scene and we don't in this one, and maybe, Akinola would come back and say like, no, from a sound perspective, I really think this scene works with music, and, maybe this one doesn't type thing. I don't know. Just an idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Something to ask Chibnall himself. Or Akinola. Whoever responds.
Probably neither of them.
Tweet at them, hey, got a question for you.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm out of things to say for this, so.
Yeah, I don't have too much more. I do really like this episode. I think it's a nice kind of cap off to the season before next week's Battle of Ranskorav Kolos, in that it kind of gives us almost the resolution to the Grace part of Graham and Ryan's story. Without saying too much about next week, I think there's a lot of undue criticism for some of Graham's actions next week, but in my opinion, I think that the Graham-Ryan dynamic next week, looking back at this episode, having rewatched it, actually follows nicely, like character-wise, from this episode, in my opinion, to form kind of a complete, not necessarily complete, but let's say complete for now, character arc.
Interesting, yeah. We'll have to see. I do want to mention, this is totally unrelated to the episode, but, now that I'm watching these recorded from BBC America, I'm getting, ads that I have to, fast forward through / skip. And apparently there's an AR TARDIS app. So augmented reality. So like you download the app and like you can walk into the TARDIS with your phone and just kind of see the interior, which is interesting.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that you watch it on BBC America again, because that reminded me that a couple of weeks ago you mentioned on the episode that like one of the episodes seemed to be really fast paced, And I think I proposed this theory off recording, but I should say it on recording that potentially why it may have seemed quicker for you than me is because there is a rumor, not like officially confirmed, but I think a lot of people, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to support this, that BBC America will, on retransmission of the episodes, not on the original first airing, but on retransmissions of episodes that are longer than 47 minutes, because American hour-long time slots feature 47 minutes of content roughly, the BBC may speed up episodes by 5% to fit them into the hour time slot, which is probably not so noticeable for like this week, which is a 49-minute episode. Last week was 47, but like I think, I don't remember what episode that was. Maybe it was Demons of the Punjab or the week before that. It was Saranga, actually, I think.
Yeah, I think it was.
Saranga was like a 51-minute episode, I think, so...
Yeah, maybe they sped up like the first 10 minutes of it or something.
Sped it up by maybe like 5% to shave off 4 minutes. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I did try like looking around to see if they were still doing this, because I know they did do it a couple years ago, and all I could find was some people going like, yeah, they're probably most likely still doing this. They've never like officially confirmed it, but it's like...
Probably, yeah. It's so weird too how they cut in the commercials, because they like, there's no commercial for like the first 20 minutes, and then you get like a fairly long block of commercials, and then they start happening more frequently. I don't know if that's how I haven't actually watched TV in a long time, so I don't know if that's normal now, but...
I don't think so. I haven't really watched TV either. It's so long. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're almost done with the season. How exciting. Yeah.
We're almost in 2020.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. That's kind of weird. Well, anyway, if you would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decadentvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on It Takes You Away and the Frog. I'm glad it lived up to the hype for Keon, because I've been hyping it up for a year on the show. A week ago I realized, like, oh no, what if he doesn't like it because I've been hyping it up?
No, it was great.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, all at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. Next time we're watching the Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos, but until then, the end.